beneath the largest movable structure ever built by humans, something is still alive. It's been 40 years since Chernobyl exploded. You can tour Pripyat now. You can stand meters from the reactor building. Tourists do it every day. But 90% of what's inside Reactor 4, no human can enter. Not now. Maybe not for 1,000 years. There's a mass of radioactive lava down there that can kill you in under 5 minutes. And here's the terrifying part. As of 2021, scientists detected something they didn't expect. It's still undergoing fission, still generating heat, still smoldering like embers in a barbecue pit. So what exactly is trapped beneath that dome? Why is it still so dangerous 40 years later? And what happens when the structure protecting it fails, which, as of 2025, it just did? Let's rewind. April 26, 1986, 1:23 a.m. in the morning. The control room of Reactor 4. Late night shift. A safety test that should have been routine. The operators had been preparing for hours, running the reactor at reduced power, systems disabled to simulate emergency conditions. What they didn't know was that they'd put the reactor into the most dangerous state possible. Low power, unstable, like a car engine struggling to idle. At 1:23 a.m., something went catastrophically wrong. In seconds, the reactor power surged from 200 megawatts to over 30,000, 150 times normal operating capacity. The fuel rods began to rupture. Steam pressure built instantly. And then, the first explosion, a massive steam explosion that blew the 1,000-ton concrete lid off the reactor core like a bottle cap. 4 seconds later, a second blast. This one was different. Possibly hydrogen, possibly another steam explosion so powerful it tore through the building itself. The roof of Reactor 4 was gone completely. For the first time in human history, a nuclear reactor core was open to the sky. Smoldering graphite saturated the area, burning at over 2,000 degrees Celsius, contaminated with radioactive materials, releasing a plume of radioactive smoke that was spread across Europe. That fire would burn for 10 days. To put the scale into perspective, the explosion and fire released 400 times more radioactive material than the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined. But the most dangerous thing wasn't the explosion. It wasn't even the fire. It was what happened below, the meltdown. With the cooling system gone and temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Celsius, the uranium fuel rods began to melt. Not just the fuel. The zirconium cladding around them, the graphite, the sand workers had dumped from helicopters trying to smother the fire, the concrete structures beneath the reactor. Everything melted together into a single radioactive lava. This substance has a name, corium. It's one of the most dangerous materials on Earth. And it began to flow. The molten corium ate through the reactor floor. It poured into corridors. It flowed down stairwells. It pooled in basement rooms like some kind of radioactive lava flow, hardening into bizarre formations as it cooled. For days, this continued. The corium spread through multiple levels of the reactor building, creating a network of contaminated spaces that would remain lethal for centuries. When workers finally made it into those corridors 6 months later, they found something no one expected. December 1986. 6 months after the explosion, a team of investigators made their way into a corridor deep beneath Reactor 4. They were dosimetrists, radiation specialists, equipped with the best protective gear available at the time. Their mission: map the contamination, understand what they were dealing with. They turned a corner into room 305-2, a basement corridor about 9 meters below ground level. And there, in the dim emergency lighting, they saw something that looked like it didn't belong on Earth. A massive, wrinkled black mass, about 2 meters wide, roughly 2 tons. Its surface was cracked and folded, like tree bark fused with volcanic glass. Dark, textured, otherworldly. The team leader, a dosimetrist named Vasya Koryagian, called it what it resembled: the elephant's foot, the most dangerous object on Earth. The readings they got were terrifying. According to measurements taken in 1986, this formation was emitting roughly 100 sieverts per hour. To put that in perspective, a dose of 5 sieverts is lethal to about half the people exposed to it. 10 sieverts kills almost everyone within weeks. At 100 sieverts per hour, the math is brutal. 5 minutes near the elephant's foot would deliver a fatal dose. 30 seconds would give you radiation sickness within a week, dizziness, fatigue, nausea. 2 minutes, and your cells would begin to hemorrhage. 4 minutes, and you'd experience vomiting, diarrhea, and fever. As one researcher grimly noted, 200 seconds next to it would lead to a relatively quick death, which is better than many alternatives. So how did they study it? They couldn't approach it. Instead, they rigged up a camera on wheels, essentially a remote-controlled photography system that they could push around the corner to document what they'd found. Even the camera struggled. The radiation was so intense it damaged the electronics. In 1996, 10 years after the disaster, a radiation specialist named Artur Korneyev ventured close enough to take what became the most famous photo of the elephant's foot. It's a haunting image. Dark, grainy, distorted. And here's the thing, that graininess isn't a photography problem. It's the radiation itself destroying the film in real time. Every streak, every artifact, every imperfection in that photo is caused by ionizing radiation hitting the camera. By 1996, radiation levels had dropped to about 10 sieverts per hour, still lethal, but survivable for short exposures. Korneyev spent just seconds near the formation to capture that shot. What it's actually made of. Here's what surprised scientists. The elephant's foot is only about 10% uranium by mass. The rest is melted concrete, sand, steel, and graphite. Everything that was in the reactor's path as the corium flowed through. But that 10% uranium is still deadly. It's the radioactive heart of this mass, and it will remain dangerous for thousands of years. When the elephant's foot was first discovered, it was so hard that scientists had to use a Kalashnikov rifle, also known as an AK-47, to shoot off samples for analysis. The density was extraordinary, like trying to chip pieces off solid rock. And then things got worse. The decomposition. Here's the unsettling part. The elephant's foot has been decomposing. Over decades of exposure to moisture and radiation-induced decay, the formation has begun to break down. Valery Savelyev from Ukraine's Institute for Safety Problems of Nuclear Power Plants described its current state. Now it more or less has the consistency of sand. Think about what that means. A 2-ton mass of radioactive material is slowly crumbling into dust. Radioactive dust. Dust that could become airborne. Dust that could be spread far and wide if containment fails. This is why humidity control inside the containment structures is so critical. Too much moisture accelerates the decomposition. But you also can't let it get too dry, or the dust becomes more mobile. But the elephant's foot is just one formation. The corium flowed in multiple directions that night, creating an entire labyrinth of radioactive masses beneath Reactor 4. And, incredibly, some of it is still active. So let's break down what's actually still off-limits in 2026. The corium network. The elephant's foot gets all the attention, but it's actually just part of what scientists call the horizontal flow. There's also the large and small vertical flows, essentially multiple masses of corium that pooled in different rooms beneath the reactor. Combined, there's an estimated 170 tons of irradiated uranium still down there. That's 95% of the original fuel load from Reactor 4. And about 200 tons of highly radioactive material total when you include all the contaminated concrete and debris trapped inside the original sarcophagus. This isn't just a cleanup job. This is a containment problem that will last centuries. But here's where it gets really interesting. Some of that corium, it's not just sitting there decaying, it's still active. Room 305-2 still smoldering. In 2021, scientists detected something alarming. Neutron emissions, the signature of nuclear fission, were rising from room 305-, the same basement corridor where the elephant's foot sits. The readings suggested that fission reactions were increasing in the corium. Neil Hyatt, a nuclear materials chemist at the University of Sheffield, described it this way. It's like the embers in a barbecue pit. The fuel isn't dead. It's smoldering. Not a fire, not a runaway reaction, but a slow, sustained fission process that's still generating heat 40 years later. This is one reason why these rooms remain completely inaccessible to humans. So how can you study something that causes instant death? We send machines instead. These basement corridors are now only accessible by robots. Since 2021, Boston Dynamics spot robots have been sent into areas where radiation mapping would require hazmat suits and time limits measured in seconds. Even robots struggle. The radiation damages their electronics over time. Cameras degrade. Circuits fail. Each mission must be quick. Some areas inside Reactor 4 still register radiation levels up to 300 sieverts per hour. At that dose, you'd be dead within a minute of exposure. The Red Forest, outside the reactor building, the most dangerous outdoor area. It's a 10 square kilometer zone directly behind the power plant. When Reactor 4 exploded, this forest absorbed massive amounts of radiation. The trees turned a rusty orange and died within days, giving it the grimacing name of the Red Forest. Liquidators bulldozed dead trees and buried them in trenches, but the contamination still didn't go away. It seeped into the soil, concentrated in the earth, and remains there today. Current radiation in the Red Forest ranges from 0.1 to 10 millisieverts per hour. For context, the average person receives about 2.4 millisieverts in an entire year from natural background radiation. Walking through certain parts of the Red Forest could deliver your yearly safe dose in a matter of hours. More than 90% of the zone's contamination is concentrated in the soil of the Red Forest. This is why it remains strictly off-limits even today. But if you think the Red Forest is dangerous, there's a place even closer to the reactor that makes it look almost safe by comparison. And then there's the innermost area, what officials in 1986 called the Black Zone. This is the core 10-kilometer radius around Reactor 4, anything registering over 200 microsieverts per hour. When evacuees first left their homes in Pripyat and surrounding villages, they were told they'd be back in a few days. To their shock, they never returned. And that designation, the Black Zone, the area too contaminated for human habitation, hasn't changed. Scientists estimate it will remain unsafe for several millennia near Reactor 4 itself. For decades, all of this, the corium masses, the red forest, the black zone, has been contained by two structures: the original sarcophagus, built in 1986, and the new safe confinement that now surrounds it. But in 2025, that protection was compromised. Within months of the explosion, Soviet authorities knew they had to contain the disaster, and they did it in the most brutal way imaginable. The original sarcophagus. In just 206 days post-explosion, workers constructed a massive concrete shell over the destroyed reactor. But calling them workers doesn't capture what actually happened. These were the liquidators, hundreds of thousands of people, many of them soldiers, conscripted to build something that was never meant to last. They absorbed radiation in shifts measured in minutes. Some areas were so hot that robots were sent in first. When the robots failed, humans went in instead. Bolts couldn't be screwed in manually. The radiation was too intense. Remote systems had to be designed on the fly, and even then, the structure couldn't be sealed properly. The sarcophagus was built on top of ruins that were never structurally stable. Water leaked in. Radiation leaked out. By the 1990s, the sarcophagus was deteriorating. Cracks appeared. Sections of the roof were at risk of collapse. Engineers warned that if the roof caved in, it would kick up a massive cloud of radioactive dust, potentially recontaminating huge areas of Ukraine and Europe. Something had to be done. Something unprecedented. The new safe confinement. So, the international community did something remarkable. They built the largest movable structure on Earth, 108 meters tall, higher than the Statue of Liberty, 257 meters wide, long enough to cover 3 football fields, 36,000 tons of steel and concrete. The arch alone weighs more than 10 Eiffel Towers. And here's the engineering marvel. It wasn't built over the reactor. It was constructed off-site, then slid into place on rails in November 2016. The entire structure, this massive protective shell, moved into position like a garage door closing over the old sarcophagus. The price tag, 1.5 billion euros, funded by 45 countries through the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. The total shelter implementation plan cost 2.1 billion euros. The purpose? Contain the radioactive remains for 100 years while engineers figure out how to actually remove the fuel and dismantle what's left of Reactor 4. And then, on Valentine's Day 2025, everything changed. 2 attack drones struck the new safe confinement. The outer cladding was penetrated. The inner cladding layer was damaged. A fire broke out in the insulation between the layers. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky accused Russia of deliberately trying to create a nuclear incident. Whether deliberate or collateral, the damage was real. Ukrainian teams made emergency repairs, patching what they could while monitoring radiation levels. But the full extent of the damage wouldn't be clear for months. In December 2025, the International Atomic Energy Agency conducted its first comprehensive assessment of the new safe confinement since the strike. Their conclusion was stark. IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi announced that the NSC had lost its primary safety functions, including the confinement capability. However, he noted that there was no permanent damage to its load-bearing structures or monitoring systems. Translation: the structure is still standing, but it can no longer do what it was designed to do, contain radioactive material. The structure that was supposed to protect Europe from Chernobyl for a century, compromised after just 9 years. So what happens now? In the months following the strike, Ukrainian emergency teams worked to stabilize the damage. Limited repairs were made, patches on the outer cladding, restoration of some monitoring systems. The IAEA maintained a presence, conducting regular inspections, but full restoration? That's a different story. Even before the drone strike, the decommissioning plan was ambitious. Chernobyl's 3 remaining reactors, units 1, 2, and 3, are being decommissioned on a timeline extending 2064. That's nearly 40 more years of work. The original sarcophagus inside the new safe confinement 2019 deadline to dismantle its most unstable structures, the sections at risk of collapse that could create dust clouds. But as for actually removing the fuel-containing materials from Reactor 4, no policy has been decided. The timeline for that remains uncertain. Remember Valery Savelyev's assessment? The elephant's foot more or less has the consistency of sand now. If removal attempts cause that material to become airborne dust during extraction, the consequences could be catastrophic, potentially releasing radioactive particles into the atmosphere. And there's still the fission problem. As of 2021, neutron emissions from room 305-2 were increasing. Those smoldering embers that Neil Hyatt described, they complicate everything. You can't safely handle fuel that's still undergoing fission reactions. But there is some good news. In May 2025, Ukrainian authorities announced that 100 hectares of land in the exclusion zone had been cleared for potential farming. Contamination levels in these areas had dropped to safe levels, proof that parts of the zone are recovering. The exclusion zone is shrinking in some places. The outer edges may be rehabilitated within decades. Pripyat, the ghost city that's become an icon of abandonment, already has radiation levels similar to background radiation in many cities. But the inner zones? That's a different timeline entirely. The outer edges of the exclusion zone may be safe by 2050, maybe sooner in some areas. The inner 10 kilometers around Reactor 4? Scientists say centuries. The elephant's foot and the corium masses directly beneath the reactor? Millennia. So let's come back to the question we started with. Why is 90% of Reactor 4 still off limits in 2026? It's not just one thing. It's layers. The corium masses are still there. 170 tons of irradiated uranium that will take thousands of years to decay to safe levels. The elephant's foot, once hard as rock, is crumbling into radioactive dust that requires constant humidity control to prevent from becoming airborne. And the structure designed to protect all of Europe from this radioactive legacy, a structure built to last 100 years, funded by 45 nations, moved into place by some of the most sophisticated engineering on Earth, was compromised after 9 years by a single drone strike. This is where you feel that strange mix of admiration and awe. Admiration for what humans built, the liquidators who constructed the original sarcophagus in 206 days, absorbing radiation in shifts measured in minutes. The engineers who designed the largest movable structure on Earth. The international cooperation that made the new safe confinement possible, 45 countries contributing 2.1 billion euros to contain a disaster that threatened everyone. And awe at how fragile it all is. A single drone, a single strike, and decades of work, billions of dollars, the coordinated effort of nations can be undone in an afternoon. We measure nuclear disasters in immediate deaths. Chernobyl killed 31 people in the first 3 months. Firefighters, plant workers, helicopter pilots. But the real cost isn't measured in those first casualties. The real cost is measured in time. Chernobyl wasn't a one-day event. It's a multi-generational project. The people who will finally make Reactor 4 safe, who will remove the last of the corium, dismantle the sarcophagi, restore the land, haven't been born yet. Some of them won't be born for decades, maybe centuries. That's the cost. Time. Human time measured across lifetimes we can barely imagine. So here's what I'm left wondering. If something so carefully constructed, something that requires the best minds in engineering, the resources of dozens of nations, years of planning, can be damaged so easily, what does that say about how we manage our most dangerous creations? And if the world can come together to build something like the new safe confinement, pool resources, share expertise, work across borders to solve a problem this complex, why did it take a disaster to make it happen? Let me know what you think in the comments.